how do you feel right now with the state of not only music but even death metal? We've kind of seen a big change in the scene, and you know, they just announced now that if you go to Europe and you're flying back here, you have to be vaccinated and all this. Like, I mean, I think me and you, it's pretty obvious we
Hmm.
share a lot of the same,
Hmm.
political. I don't want to say political, but just in general about this whole thing, what these last 2 years have been like, and what are your thoughts right now about all this and the mandates and
Oh yeah,
the
it's totally
endless?
unsustainable. It's completely unsustainable. There's just no way you can't do it. I mean, if the governments around the world were to basically collectively decide that in order to fly international and to get into these countries, everybody has to be vaccinated with some vaccine. And you have to have that on paper or on a digital thing or whatever, a vaccine passport. If they were to decide that and say, okay, and that's the end of it. Everybody gets their one vaccine, and then we can all travel again. Then I would say you would have the holdouts like me and maybe like you who would just be like, well, I guess I'm not touring internationally then because I'm not doing that. So they would have some portion of musicians and fans would be like that. But I think, judging from what I've seen, most people would agree to that. And so touring would resume. And those festivals in Europe would happen again, and bands from Europe would be able to come here and vice versa, and it would go back. But with the current situation where you have to test and you have to have a negative test within 72 hours of getting into a country, with how fallible those tests are, you have I mean, they're extremely inaccurate, and the way those tests, and we'll see where they go with them, because they have PCR tests, and then they have the standard PCR tests, and then they have these antigen rapid tests. But those things are calibrated off of the PCR. So the whole thing with the PCR, of the way they set the PCR, it's a machine that has a primer in it that is the sort of the example upon which the sample is compared. The way it's set right now is, if you set the PCR machine at, let's say, 35 samples or greater, which is common, then it'll find if this SARS virus spike protein is floating around. And man, these viruses, it's just, every virus is just everywhere. It's all the time, everywhere, all the time, every virus. There's probably malaria up my nose. There's probably, HIV up my nose. There's probably HPV and other kinds of cancer viruses up my nose if you go looking for them. And then they're in your nose, and they're in the squirrel that's out there in the grass. They're in his nose. They're in the deer's nose. They're in everybody's nose, right? Because everybody's just in lungs. All this stuff. What matters is there a high enough viral, first of all, are you susceptible? Does your body know the virus or not? If your body does not know the virus, and it is a type of virus that can attach, that can procreate in your cells, then the question is, are there enough of these viruses in your body to where they can start replicating and take hold? Is there enough viral load to where you can actually turn it into an infection? That's the question with everything, because and before, when we used to say, I got a case of the cold, I got a case of the flu, what that means is you got enough of this virus in your body to replicate enough for you to start getting symptoms and then become symptomatic, and for it to be transmissible. So that's what matters. What matters is, is there enough of this virus in my body replicating to where I could get sick or I could pass it on to others? It's not about whether or not there's 1 or 2 fragments of a virus in my nose, because if you go looking for it, everything's in my nose. So the way that they have the test set up to where they set the threshold super high, so it can find even the tiniest amount of some virus in your nose, regardless of whether or not you have symptoms, regardless of or whether or not you are immune. You could be, you'd be completely immune. You could have already got the disease, have complete, total natural immunity to it, but people still putting a swab up your nose, they'll keep finding it because it's all around. So the test, the way they're doing the test is a fraud. It's a fraud on its face, and it's just an obvious fraud. Even the guy who made PCR technology, a biologist named Kary Mullis, the same characters, Fauci and the rest of the same characters, were trying to use the PCR to test for HIV back in the early 90s. And Kary Mullis, the inventor, was like, you can't do this. You can't use this technology to diagnose a disease, because if you're just going and looking for an HIV fragment in someone's blood or in someone's nose or whatever, you'll probably find it, but that doesn't mean they'll ever get sick. He said, you can't use PCR to diagnose disease. You can only use it in a laboratory situation for where you're trying to manufacture a product and you need to know whether or not a piece of a genome went from one cell to another, and there's a lot of uses for it. But you could also use it as one test amongst others to try to diagnose a disease. But you can't just test somebody's nose and, if there's one particle of coronavirus in their nose, then you just say you're a threat. That's just complete garbage. And so what's happening is you go on tour and, even vaccinated people, right? So they're vaccinated. They're all vaccinated, let's say. And you go on tour and everybody's at the airport and you got to take the test, or you actually have to take your test before you show up to the airport. So you have 72 hours. You order your test, you take it, and a day or two before you have to fly out, the drummer says, guys, I tested positive. Wait a minute, bro, you were vaccinated. Yeah, I know, but I tested positive. Right? This is happening all over the world right now. Yeah. And I tested positive. What? How can that be? Well, they don't know anything about this. They don't know. Well, because that frickin' virus is in the air. It's on surfaces. It's in everybody else's nose. It's in people's breath. You caught a waft of something and there was a little piece of this junk in your nose and it wasn't going to do anything to you, but your test turned positive. Or here's where we don't even know yet. We don't even know if other coronaviruses or other particles are tricking the PCR to thinking that it's picked up the COVID-19 virus, SARS-CoV-2, and we don't even know that. So we don't even know if flu is, because I can go into this, but there's a lot of evidence to show that perhaps flu viruses are setting off the PCR machine when it's set to test for the COVID-19 virus. So this whole thing is a complete fraud. What it should be is if they were really interested in your health, and let's say the vaccine even worked, because the vaccines don't even work. It's already been proven, like there's that Israeli study that showed that your natural immunity is up to 27 times better than your immunity from a vaccine. So anybody that's healthy like us, what would we want to do? We'd want to do what the Amish did, and that is purposely contract the disease so that we could develop immunity to it, like you used to do with measles and mumps and stuff. That's what everyone would want to do. That's what the order should be. The order should have been, okay, old folks, protect yourself. Everybody that feels healthy, go out in the world, contract the disease, get over it. It's just a cold. and then you'll have natural immunity, and that'll block the transmission across the whole society. That would have been the smartest thing to do. That's what was always done. No one ever developed a vaccine in the middle of the pandemic. They developed vaccines after the pandemic is over, after everyone has developed natural immunity, so that it can't emerge again. That's the way it's supposed to be done. So the whole thing was done completely wrong. And that's because there's a greater agenda here. They're not trying to do this for our health. They're trying to do this to establish all the connections they need to establish global governance. That's what this is all about. Global governance, global financialization, global synchronization between all governments as much as possible. That's what they're trying to do with this. And so this isn't about health. But back to the music scene, as long as they have these tests required for having to enter in to these countries, you're going to have, let's say it's even just a 1% chance that you will test positive accidentally, or you'll have a little of the virus in your nose, but you're already immune and it's not going to do anything. Let's say 1% of people, let's say it's 1/10 of 1%. That's one in 1,000. So that means the chances are, with all the bands that are touring and everybody that's flying around and having to do stuff, what's going to happen is every year there's going to be a handful of high-profile artists and tours that are going to be canceled. Right in the middle of the whole thing. It's going to be high-profile people. It's going to be some top people, and it's going to be some people at the bottom too. And you're just going to have these abrupt cancellations. It won't be all the time, but it'll be enough to make it so that the industry can't do that. They can't, whatever band, Dave Matthews Band, or whatever the new, $1 million band is, and all the preparation and all the money and all the marketing and the promotion and all everything, and all the clubs and all the fans and all the ticket sales and everything that goes into a Dave Matthews worldwide tour. And they fly in and out, they're on buses when they're domestic, and then they're flying. And chances are, one or two of those tours that Dave Matthews does, somebody in the band is going to test positive. This is on the optimistic side, where it's just a small chance that someone would test positive. I think it's a bigger chance because I'm looking at what's going on around there. Like, for example, that death metal band Jaeger, their drummer tested positive, I think, coming into the United States. I'm not sure, on one of these tours. And so they actually have a setup to where they have the drum parts in the computer. And so they're going to continue the tour without the drummer, with the computer playing the drums. This is not a big time band. So we're already seeing it happen. I think the false positives is much more than 1/10 of 1%. I think it's more like I don't know what it is, but what's going to happen is it's going to put such a dent, and it's going to put such a fear in the, I'll give you another example. Exodus, my friend Jack Gibson, he's in Exodus. He gives me the news of what Exodus is doing. They had a tour. I think it was one of those Thrash of the Titans or some kind of tour with, I think it was Death Angel Testament. There was some kind of Bay Area thrash tour that was booked for right now, for this season, and they were going to be on it. I believe everyone in the band is vaccinated, but they decided they're not going to do the tour because of the chances that somebody would test positive at some airport somewhere, and that would screw the whole thing up. They, even at their level, they just said, no, we can't do this. So it's not possible. You cannot have touring. You can't have it. They're just, I guess some people will just take the chance, and maybe there's some bands where, some members can be replaced or whatever, but no, I think you probably would start to move into the domain where bands would start to cheat. They would start to find ways to cheat. Oh, here's my test. I tested negative, but it was, it's this one. It's like people are doing with the passports. People are cheating with the passports and stuff. And so there's just no way. There's just no way. And you can't continue like that. And that's if everyone decides to get vaccinated. Now, if you still have, last point on this is if you still have 20% of the public, let's say it's at that level, it might be 30%, maybe 40% in some places, but let's say it's 20% of the public who will not get vaccinated to go into a club or any of this. They just won't do it. And it's an appropriate number. There was a report that came out of, I think it was out of the UK. I think it was a musicians union or somebody. They found that nightclubs are turning, nightclubs are turning on average a 15%. They have a 15% profit margin after they cover all their costs for everything, for bringing in bands and liquor and everything else, and the rent and all that. They have a 15% profit margin. Well, if 20% of their potential audience is not there anymore, can't get in, there's no profits. They can't even stay open. So the whole music industry, whether it's with testing or it's with vaccinations, is completely unfeasible. You can't have professional music touring industry at all while this continues. So that's just, unless somebody can show me, and I've been thinking about this, unless somebody can show me, how that's not the case, unless music gets completely socialized and the states and the countries end up saying, well, we're just going to, supplement the income of these clubs so that we can keep them open. That maybe is what some countries would do. Maybe. I mean, there are already a lot of clubs in Europe are already, they're already getting that kind of assistance.
The thing that I'm so confused by is that in Seattle here we have clubs that music venues and bars and stuff that are, some of them kind of pretend they're disheveled by this and some of the mandates, but it seems like the majority of them are like, you better show us your vaccination card, no mask, no service. And it's like they're thrusting this fist right up your ass of all these liberal, or not, I don't want to say liberal, leftist agendas and
progressives.
And what the only thing I can think is they're getting paid for this. They're getting some kind of reimbursement, some kind of federal grants to go along with this, because it doesn't. There's no possible way that a club owner or someone who owns a restaurant is that hardcore about this stuff. There's no way. There's something in it, something going on for them. They're getting something behind the scenes. Even the musicians, like, I see like Korn, or or like some big band, like you said, that I tested positive. Okay, tour's canceled, guys. Sorry. I don't believe it. I think they're getting some kind of unemployment payment. Something's going on, because I just feel like we all know when someone's financial benefit is taken away from them or their money, they go crazy. So why is everyone so happy about these rules?
Really good question. And I think like if it's Korn, if it's that level, I would not doubt that they're. I haven't looked into the whole antigen testing very much. I refuse to test, but I would not doubt that there's, I mean, look at the politicians. I mean, they're like, wear the mask when you're on camera, but when you're off camera, it's okay to take off the mask, right? I mean, that's just happening everywhere with these progressive politicians. And so what about, you have to test with these tests to go into the airports and stuff like that. But, we have a way to make sure that, we have partners and, we'll get your positive test results. It's okay. You're all vaccinated. It's all safe. We'll make sure that, I would not doubt that there's cheating with the testing going on. And then in terms of the clubs, these clubs, okay, we know the hospitals and other healthcare providers for sure, this is totally out there, are getting government subsidies. They were already hurt by the whole economic collapse, and now they're relying on government subsidies to which they're just printing the money, right? And that's, you know, part of the whole inflation problem. And they're just printing the money and they're just giving it out to hospitals, healthcare providers who are following the rules. Now, when it comes to clubs, I'm sure that, well, I already know there was a program, was it the CARES Act or something, but there was a program to supply bailouts to businesses. But I also know that not everybody gets those funds. So these little nightclubs in Seattle or wherever that are acting so authoritarian about the rules, it's either they are taking money, they have been accepted and they are getting some subsidy, or they feel like if they get caught doing this, they'll never be able to apply for a subsidy. And they're being told, if you break these rules, you will never be able to apply for a subsidy. If your application for a subsidy is in process and you are, get an infraction, that will cancel your subsidy. Of course, they're being told that. Could be that, or it could be that they're afraid of the local. They're afraid of the mayor and the police and the health department, and they're afraid of those guys. And I'm sure I've seen interviews with all kinds of business owners that have said, we're following the rules and we're collapsing here. And so it could be that these people that are just being authoritarian about it are following the rules while they're collapsing. Because, as you know, the whole worldview around the pandemic and everything that goes into it has now become a cult operating system. And so the people who are pushing this like that, they're in the cult. And it's no different than what you've seen every other time in history. This is we are in the West now experiencing another rise. This is a collective hysteria. This is another, you can read books about the history of mass hysterias. This is another mass hysteria, and there is a certain portion of the population that is very collectivist minded, and they revere authority, and they treat the government as though it's a parent, and they have a very instinctual reaction that when they feel like they're in fear, like their health, or there's a threat, whether it's a terrorist threat, or whether it's a UFO threat, or whether it's a virus threat, or whatever, they're going to look to the big daddy government, to the parent, and they're going to do whatever the parent says so that they can feel protected. And if you're coming in there and going, come on, grow up, man, you're not going to catch this virus, it's a scam. They're like, that just to them just sounds incredibly scary, and they're not going to do that. And they're the kids that wanted to please the teacher, and they're just going to keep pleasing the teacher. There's a certain portion of the public, and there are hotspots of this mentality. And you're in one of those places in Seattle, the West Coast, the coasts of America are these progressive hotspots. And this is not coming from, these people are not using reason. They're not doing their own research. They're just not. They're not looking into it. They don't want to see what they might find. They don't want to take responsibility. This is the biggest thing. They don't want to take responsibility for having their own perspective, which might put them at odds with their peers. They don't want to lose their peer group. They don't want to be outsiders. They don't want to be ostracized. They don't want to be scapegoated. They don't want to be pushed out. They want to be in the group. And this is a personality type, and there's always, and then I think also when you add to this the sort of pampered state of our civilization, where we're so far away from death and real physical threats that, somebody, says, oh, virus is going to get you. It's just like, boo. And it's like, so there's it's sort of, it's kind of like how I was talking about with Vile earlier. It's like, how does a band take off? Or look at Led Zeppelin, or look at the Beatles. Look at all these, or any band. Look at all these ingredients that kind of go into making, certain kind of art, like whatever kind of, surrealistic art or whatever that you wouldn't think could take off. But what are the things that combine sort of like destiny to make something like a movement start, or a genre, or some kind of well, it's the same thing on the downside with hysteria and the decline of a society. There's things that combine fortuitously to strike at the greatest weakness that a society has. Wherever there is a collective weakness, something will emerge. I call this the archetype of the virus, which Melissa and I were using that concept way before this. The archetype of the virus is wherever you are weak, something will emerge to challenge you there. So the whole pandemic and everything that we see happening is an opportunity for the dark side of the universe, so to speak, to challenge humanity, and especially the civilized world, in the places where it's the weakest. Because once you really look at the actual data, and you really look at the chances of getting hurt from the virus and all of this and where it came from, and you really look at it, you find out, okay, it's like a flu. For the person who's healthy, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. You get over it and you're fine. For the person who's not healthy, well, why weren't you taking care of your health? Right? So, and do you have the right to lock down the whole world because you are not taking care of yourself? And then elderly people, if you were to go to the people who are living in nursing homes and say, hey, we have two options. You guys have a greater chance of dying here. You're already past the average age of death, and this is a new disease that's wafting through. We're going to listen to what you want, elderly people in nursing homes. Do you want us to lock down the entire world and destroy the economy of the whole global ecosystem so that we can protect you and you can get another couple years in the nursing home? Or would you just like to take your chances with this and let us go about our lives? They would say, just go about your lives. We'll handle it. So this is when you really look at it and you go, okay, what are my chances and blah, 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 you find out it's a nothing burger. There's nothing to this. That's not even a big deal. And so when you see this kind of hysteria and this kind of overreaction and all this, yes, you can go point to these guys up here who are actually triggering it. Of course. It's a false flag event. Of course, it's being triggered for a bigger reason, just like how 9/11 and these other events were. Of course, there are people who are doing the triggering. But why does it work? Why do so many people just fall for it so easily? That has to do with the psychological composition of the people and where they're at in their own development that cause this to happen, because they're not doing their research. They're not looking at it objectively. They're falling into the hysteria and just falling into the tyranny archetype, which is just unfolding. And then we're learning about how many psychopaths there are in positions of leadership. And we're learning how unconscious and how unconscious so many people are. and probably also how fearful a lot of people who are in government, in corporations, the kind of people who kissed ass to get into the positions they're in, and they feel like they never were courageous people in the first place, and now they have to go with the flow, and they don't have they've been selling out for their whole lives. This is all the people who are working in government and corporations, and they've been selling out themselves their whole lives. And now they're asked to, do I want to have a contrary opinion on this? The answer is no, they don't. And it's unconscious. So we're finding out who are the cowards. We're finding out who are the people with all this unexamined fears and shadow material. Who are the sociopaths? Who are the psychopaths? And who are the heroes? And who are the self-reflective masters of their own destiny who are willing to go into the world and take a chance? And it's separating out the weak from the strong right now. That's what's happening.
Yeah, I agree. And I also feel like there's a lot of people too where you said they don't want to lose the approval of their peers and they're afraid to go against the grain. There's
huge.
That. Another thing I've noticed is some of the people I've known, especially in the metal scene, who have never been hygienic. These are people who don't have any regard for germs or their bodies. I saw a girl who's 300 pounds covered in tattoos and piercings. She says, I work at the front door and I turn people away every day if they don't have a vaccine. Just get your effing vaccine and get blah, 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 wear your mask. And they're so obsessed with this. And I'm like, man, you have never spent a minute of your life caring about your body, and now it's your time to be a hero, and it's so there's that too. There's also a personal ego thing where it's their time to beat that person up, or
okay. Well, the other thing, which is kind of along the lines of what you're saying, is that we're in a period where our generation, the Generation X, the Millennials, the Gen Z, these are the least religious people that have ever lived in Western civilization in a long, long time. And so the religion is kind of the religious operating system kind of fulfills a lot of needs, and it gives you a structure, and it gives you ethics, how to act, and it also pacifies your fear of death, and it also gives you examples for how to act in the face of death. And when the religion is gone, and people don't believe it anymore, they don't believe there's a God or a devil, and they're not influenced that way anymore. The psyche demands a replacement for that. The human psyche it's so old. It's why humans and people are kind of like dogs. People are kind of like monkeys. People are kind of like squirrels. People are kind of like reptiles. Our psyche has roots. It's that old. And the human beings have been creating these religious operating systems as a solution to these gigantic human problems. And when that's gone, you have to put something there. There's an existential and psychic energetic need for something to fill in. And this whole thing, and with the way the leadership is acting, they're just coming up and they're saying, we are the priests that can give you approval and can make you feel safe and can let you know that if you act in these ways, everything will be okay and God will smile on you. And they're saying, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. I needed that. I needed that. I needed to know that I have that assurance and that I'm doing the right thing and that God is smiling on me. But they've just replaced, it's a regression, because however many, say 7,000 years ago, people used to think of the Pharaoh as, even up to 3,000 years ago, as God on earth. The Pharaoh was God on earth, was God. And then over time, it became, well, the Pharaoh or the king is the representative for God. And then you got then you had this bifurcation where you would have the secular king or queen on the throne, who is the father figure, the parent in a secular way, and then you would have the Pope or the religious leader as the representative of God on the spiritual side. Then, in the West, America started with a whole new set of principles that kind of said the separation of church and state, they call it. The state is separated off from that, and they're not in a role of parenting. They're not in a role of acting on behalf of God, and they certainly are not gods. That's all past us now, and that's the way this civilization was formed. And now what's happening is especially in America, the people are sovereigns. The people have the same rights. Like the president and the homeless guy have the same constitutional rights. The same. They're at the same basic level. And for the first time in the history of humanity, now you have a situation where, because people are they're so needy, they're so wounded in so many ways, physically and spiritually, it's regression. They are regressing backwards to the old state, and they're saying, please, Mr. and Mrs. Representative, or, please take care of me in this situation. They're going backwards, and that's what we're seeing. And so the cult of COVID, it's a cult, and it is a church, and the church is the mother, and Fauci is the Pope, or whoever. It's split up between different people holding different positions. But the basic idea of these people are going to offer us safety and salvation and show us the right way to act. All these people, it's mainly the people who are not going for this whole thing are, to a great degree, traditional Christians and hardcore libertarians, because they already have an operating system. They're like, all right, we already have Jesus. We're already accepted death. We're already accepted we're going to heaven. We're already this. We're already that. And we don't need to replace our operating system with this new communist COVID cult system. They don't have that need. The people who are falling into this are atheists and agnostics and people who don't have a relationship to spirituality, right? So this is not only, and what you also said about that girl at the door, using this as an opportunity to bully people, right? As a way to, and this is another thing. So you have that whole religious need that is being fulfilled. And it happened in communist countries. It happened in Hitler's Nazi Germany. The Fuhrer and the Reich and all of this becomes a religious system. And so that's what's happening again right now. I mean, they did it to Mao Zedong, and you know, he was basically God. And so we have that happening again. And then you have, and this is very important, what you mentioned about the girl that wants to bully people at the door. This is the opportunity. These types of situations are opportunities for people who feel disempowered in life to exorcise their own demons, to exercise their own shadow material, which means everything that they would not like to think that they are. That girl would not like to think that she is a bully. She would not like to think that she, you know, would feel satisfied watching somebody else suffer, right? That's in her, and that this is allowing her it's allowing her shadow material to get exercised. And so that is a huge part of this, and sort of an answer about the club owner of why is the club owner doing this? They must be getting paid. But the other answer is they're getting off on it. They're getting off on scapegoating us. They're getting off just like how the Nazis did to the Jews. They're getting off on it, or how the communists did in all kinds of cases against anyone that the God leader said was the bad guy. So they're secretly getting off on being, we're the righteous ones. We're in the in group. We're with the authorities back there. They're on our side. We're the good guys. And these are all the dirty outsiders. And even though you tell them, hey, you know, the vaccination this and the vaccination that and data this and data that, or why do you have anything to fear from us? You're vaccinated. You know, all these common sense questions. I don't want to hear it. I'm in the cult. Get away from me. It's like, I saw this documentary about Scientology. I don't know if you ever saw it, but they approached some famous Scientologists, like, what's his name? Tom Hanks, and what was her name? Julia?
Rita?
No, Julia. No, another girl. She's Julia something. Julia, another actress, famous actress. She's also a Scientologist. And they went and interviewed him. And as soon as the interviewer said, what do you say to people who say that Scientology is a cult? As soon as you say that to a Scientologist, they stand up, take off the lavalier mic, throw it down, and leave the room. And they are programmed to never talk to anyone who is already assuming that Scientology is a cult. As soon as that is brought up, you are taught to leave the room and walk away. Well, it's the same thing with the COVID cult. As soon as you start talking about facts and you ought to do your own research and stuff, the eyes glaze over and they need to leave. And so this is all psychology. It's mass psychology. It's collective psychology. It's the collective shadow that Carl Jung talked about. We can go into that. And it's just like, this is a phenomenon. Human beings have been doing this over and over again. It's happening when our society is at its weakest psychologically. And now I think it's fantastic, everything that's happening. I am not pessimistic about the whole thing, because I'm seeing that we are now at a stage where there's a nice chunk of the population in America, a minority, but a nice chunk, who is totally up to speed on everything, who's got these guys nailed on all their lies and all the fake data and all of that, and we're just totally on it. And we're not going to budge. And there's way too many of us to put us in concentration camps. And every time you confront us, we nail you and make you look like the fools that you are. And in other times, in the Russian Revolution, in these other times, in the Mao's thing, and every time, there's the minority is often uneducated, or they are disempowered, and they're already, you know, they're already scapegoats. Like, you know, it gypsies and Jews and stuff. It was small minorities, and it was like they could bully them. But the people that the cultists are trying to bully now, we are the most ingenious people in the whole country. The most ingenious people, the most ingenious and self-sufficient people in the whole country were the ones saying no to these people. We're the ones. And the ones who are saying yes to the tyranny, these are the dumbest people. These are the people who never had a backbone anyway. They're the people who are the most reliant on authority. They're the people who would be the worst off if there was a famine or a flood or a situation where they had to fend for themselves. They are the most cut off from nature and the most cut off from their own deeper nature. They're at a major disadvantage. And so this is and we as Americans, we have the best underlying legal structure that has ever been for a people to stand up against tyranny. Our system was built to resist tyranny. It was built with all these bulkheads or whatever, these firewalls to stop tyranny from spreading. And yes, they're getting breached. It's like a wildfire. And yes, it's cutting through and all of that. And the Constitution is on fire. But these guys, their garbage is falling apart in real time. They're coming out. The whole world government thing is coming out. They're just showing themselves to be complete tyrants. And I'm like, yeah, bring it on. More tests. Give us more tests. Give us some FEMA camps. Start taking people to FEMA camps. Yeah, come to our doors. See how that works out. Come on. On one end, I don't want that civil war scenario to happen because I know that the real psychopaths are going to sit on top like they did after Nazi Germany, like they did after the Russian Revolution, like they did after the French Revolution. They're going to sit on top secure while the nation crumbles. But this time, there's more awareness of who the top level intergenerational power players are. And if they try to push civil war on us, they're not going to come out of this alive. Now, I'm not somebody that, I don't even have any weapons or anything. That's not my role. But I'm just saying, in the bigger scheme of this, we're in the best situation. There's never been a time when tyranny has come to a nation and the nation has had a potential to kick it back and than we have right now. So I think it's fantastic, and I think that we needed this challenge. And so, that's where I am with the whole thing.
Yeah, man, I agree with everything you said, and definitely can't wait to listen back to this interview and there's so much to absorb of that. It's the way you explain everything, and but yeah, it's and another thing too. It's just I don't know how your experiences have been with people, like they walk by you. And I had a girl the other day, she walked by me outside and went like she covered her, I have young girls like they do this and they feel all special, like they do this. I'm a clean looking guy. I'm not like tooting my horn, but I could see doing that around some dude, like homeless guy screaming and throwing things. I'm like a nice dude just standing there waiting for a cab or something, and they do this and they walk by. It's like they feel better about themselves, and like,
if you mean they're protecting themselves from your breath, or they're protecting you from their breath?
Like if I'm not wearing a mask, like I'll go walking on the beach and I'll be like 6 feet away and I'm not wearing a mask, and they then they walk by and they do this, like
they're trying to protect themselves from you.
Yeah. So it's like, what I don't understand about it is, like you said, the ridiculous of the vaccines, but then also the germ factor. It's like, is this like the movie Night of the Creeps, where they think like some slug's going to come out of my mouth and jump in their nose or something? Like, it's really bizarre. The science, that's not science, dude. Like if you walk by somebody and and they like talk or they breathe on you, you're probably not going to get sick, man. I mean, maybe I'm crazy, but it's
right.
But I'm saying, like, it's showing like how mental people are. And like you said, the old people, the old people aren't the ones I think that would be cool with all this. A lot of it I'm seeing are younger people who are obsessed with this, and they have no reason to be so worried. And it's like for all the
No.
reasons you basically explained, but
I mean, okay, does any Jehovah's Witness or Scientologist or cult member do research to find out of whether or not their group operating system is factual, is correct, is logical? If there's a historical precedent, do they know? And we're also seeing a total degradation. I mean, it's just a fact that everything or every living system has a life cycle, and societies, civilizations have life cycles. And I don't know how many distinct civilizations there have been across the planet, but it's been in the thousands. And every one of those has had its own life cycle. And a lot of civilizations kind of they touch each other and influence each other, and then they collapse into each other, and they're not usually that completely separate. But they each have their own life cycle. And I would say that America, we're in a unique situation where this is the first time, I mean, within the last 100, 150 years, because of transportation and information technology, all these distinct societies or civilizations have kind of interlocked, and they've been also through the financial markets. And so our cultural disease becomes their cultural disease. Really, the metaphor, the virus, the pandemic as a metaphor for the disease of the human psyche is very appropriate. I look at it that way. But America is sort of in the downslide. It's past its peak of, there's all these different inputs that caused it to kind of peak, and maybe you could say that maybe the 50s or the 60s maybe was like the peak. And then it's kind of been tapering down, and it's become. I mean, even though I'm not I'm not a Christian, like officially. I haven't been baptized as a Christian. My parents didn't baptize me. They were hippies. They were baptized. They came from Christian families. I'm not. And although I do not have a knee-jerk negative reaction to any religious disposition, I understand its necessity in the human psyche. But as America has become less and less Christian and less religious and less spiritual, then the religion has its own inbuilt immune system, right? Whether it's from the 10 Commandments or it's from Jesus or whatever, Buddha, whatever system, they all have this. There's a set of there's moral guidelines, there's moral truths that become ethics, becomes behavior, that if you act in these ways, you will have symbiosis. There will be sustainability amongst the people. And and it's like an immune system. In other words, if everybody is a hardcore Christian who believes that if they do wrong, they're going to hell, and believes if they do right or do what's good for the community, they're going to go to heaven, whether that's real or not, if they believe that, then any psychopath that's going to come over, and there's a certain percentage of people who are like 1% or more who are psychopaths. And anytime a psychopath comes in, you work as a manager at a department store or whatever it is, and they hire a psychopath. And then the psychopath is saying, oh, well, you know, we didn't do well on sales in this department and stuff. He's just like, just tell them different. They don't check. Oh, what? No, that would be bad. And then then the Christian looks at the psychopath and he's just like, that guy is something funny about him. He told me I should cheat on the books. No, I'm not doing that. That's bad. That would be immoral. God would not like that. But as people stop believing in that, they discard that. They're not afraid anymore. It's just a fantasy. It's just a fairy tale that you're going to go to heaven or go to hell. That's just for kids. That's Santa Claus story. That's not real. And the more psychopaths get influence, they were always around, but they just didn't have too much influence. As the religion and as the moral structure of a society starts to fall apart, like always happens, the downs in the winter time of a society, then psychopaths get more influence over people, and they start to take advantage of social systems. They start to suck the money out of it. They start to lie. They start to make advertising more and more unrealistic. They start to make science more and more of a business and less of a service. And they just start to erode everything. And then normal people start to say, fuck it, man. If the way for me to get up in this world run by psychopaths is to be a psychopath myself. And that's an unconscious decision usually. But people start doing more and more unethical things. And then, of course, psychopaths are the ones that put out the model of the greatest thing that you can do in your life is to be rich and to have everybody, narcissists, sociopaths, psychopaths, be rich, own your own airplane, have a mansion, everybody loves you, you're throwing parties and all this, and this whole materialistic view of life. They start programming kids. They become the owners of corporations. They become the owners of marketing companies. They get into politics. They get into all these NGOs. And the whole thing starts to crumble from there. And there's a book called Political Ponerology by Andrew Lubachewski, and a Polish psychiatrist who studied psychopathy and the rise of psychopathy during the years that Poland was ruled under both the Nazis and the communists later. And this manuscript finally made it to print, in the 90s. And it's a whole theory and a whole study of how when societies are on the downslide, psychopaths get into power and then they pull each other up. And then they degrade everything that they touch. Everything that they're lie factories, and everything that they touch, that they don't have inbuilt morality. And the only people that can hang out with psychopaths are sociopaths and narcissists, who are just like a little bit down the scale from them. So then the grouping of them together, and he has different terminology, but the grouping of them together makes a huge chunk. It's like a 10%, it's like a lot of people are really scummy at this point in time. And it's like used to be, you go to the top 50, 60, 70 years ago, you go to the top of any large business, any corporation, any church, any organization, and chances are you weren't going to find a psychopath at the top. Now, the chances are quite likely that you will find a psychopath at the top. And so this is like another way of looking at the way societies degrade. It's kind of like it's almost like a biological way of looking at it, where it's and then of course psychopaths can't nurture anything. They can't take care of anything. They don't have any cares. They don't have any empathy. They don't really care. It's just all about dominance and about getting their needs met. And so everything they touch falls apart. They can't run the Department of Homeland Security. They can't run the Office of President. They can't run the American Civil Liberties Union. They can't run the teachers' unions. They can't do that. They don't have that They're not nurturers. They don't care. So everything that they get involved with starts to degrade and fall apart. And that's another way of looking at where we're at right now, and what's in play. It's through the lens of psychopathy and the rise and fall of psychopaths and their influence over the levers of power in society.
Yeah, and it's definitely, you know, this definitely brought a lot of the spiders out of the wood, you know.
Yeah.
Just between
and that's
society
a good thing.
And yeah, I agree. And just society and even friends, you know, I've unfortunately lost a lot of, you know, acquaintances. I don't want to say friends, but even movie stars I used to look up to. The whole list goes on, but you know, but in a way, it is a good thing. And Colin, it was great to talk to you about all
You too,
this.
Luke.
And, you know, I think we should probably do it. You know, maybe a part 2 or 3 or something, maybe down the road. I mean, I'm sure this won't be over for a while at least, but.
I also, you know, I don't know how many people will be interested in this. I kind of found that a lot of the musicians weren't so interested in the psychological angle, but a lot of the stuff that we talked about today was about the sort of the influence. We didn't say the word evil one time in this whole conversation, but a lot of what we're talking about is evil, and the way that evil works in the psyche and how that it collectivizes and moves between people. The metaphor of the virus, you can see the idea of evil or the dark side of human nature as a pathogen. Carl Jung used to talk about it as a pathogen. And so to see a virus and everybody's like holding their mouth or their mask, it's like you know, Melissa and I were looking at the whole society and everybody running around in their rat race lives and stuff, just like off the hook out in the Bay Area. And I was like, this is a shit way to live your life, just to be totally signed on to this rat race and all this, you know, this is garbage, just all this ambition to get your degree and this, that, and the other so you can work for some garbage company or whatever. Just like, this sucks. Why would people want to live this way? And this can't work. And then this thing happened, and then everybody starts wearing their mask. And just real quick, I should mention that we had a song in our project, the O1 Experience, that was called Behind the Mask. And it was based on an animated film by Lubomir Arsov called In Shadow. And have you seen that? It's inshadow.net. Go there, watch that film. Inshadow.net. It's an animated short film. It's all 12 minutes or something like that. It's all animation about the deeper dark side of our civilization and everything that's going on. That's The Shadow. And we wrote this song and all the lyrics to that, and then we even synchronized the movie to the song when we played live. Now we're redoing that for Deprogrammatrix. This is our first song. That's deprogrammatrix.com with 1 M. But so we were talking about this whole thing. We were friends with Lubomir. We were talking about the collective nature of evil and everybody trying to hide their own darkness, their own shadow from each other. Mm-hmm. And this is what this represents. And Melissa and I put out this book called Shadow Tech, Cracking the Codes. Yeah, you haven't seen this? Shadow Tech, Cracking the Codes of Personal and Collective Darkness. You can get it on Amazon or shadowtechalchemy.com. Mm-hmm. And it's this is a whole piece. It's a systems-based exploration on the nature of evil and the human shadow and how it relates to doing personal inner work or shadow work. Mm-hmm. And this is a whole other thing. If you wanted to just at least just skim this book, we could have another conversation sometime about that. Another book that if you're into spirituality that I highly recommend is this book right here, Freedom, Alchemy for a Voluntary Society, by Stefan Heller, who is an incredible man. I won't go into who he is, but man, really good too. And if what we're doing now, just to sum it up, is so Vile is I'm waiting. I canceled the California Death Fest because LA County changed the rules to you have to be tested or have vaccine or whatever to get into the venue. I said, F that. I told the promoter I'm not ever doing that. And I'm not going to do it for the Netherlands Death Fest either, which we're booked for, if they still have that rule going on. So I'm just going to wait that out. But I'm doing this other we had this band called the O1 Experience, and that was like really dark and arty and kind of brooding and slow and arty. This band, Deprogram Matrix, is like, it's like red-pilled Alex Jones, like wake your ass up in music form. And this first song is a rework of that song Behind the Mask, and it goes along with that movie In Shadow. And so that'll be out. I just now finished the mixing the song, and we're going to work on the video, and going to have to try to do my best on the video part. But anyway, that's what's going on now, and we're just going to play around and get gigs if we can. And I mean, I'm sure we can, but just try to do the best we can with playing locally and domestically, and then kind of wait it out. But I think we're in for a big fight right now. So I'm kind of having to put Vile and all that kind of on the back burner right now, because I think we're about to get into it's going to be some big fights going on right now because the way things are going. Political, you know.
Yeah, and have you found much reassurance moving to Texas with any of these, or do you feel like it's just kind of coming in waves?
No, it's so much better here, man.
Yeah.
And it really also gives me confidence. We left the Bay Area a year ago, and it was the same cult as where you are in Seattle. Mm. And here in Austin, it's all these left-wing cities all have this kind of, this is the collectivist mindset of a certain type of people, urban people. And so Austin has that too. But Austin is in the middle of cowboy country, in the middle of Texas. And even though it would like to be a San Francisco or a Seattle, it can't quite be that. And we're just outside of Austin. And you just go out into, yes, I still see a lot of zombies, a lot of people wearing masks. They're even all vaccinated. When you walk into Walmart or someplace like that, yes, there's going to be a lot of sheeple. But you also, that's not, you know, that's I don't know, that's not the majority. And you just see a lot of normal people, a lot of Christians and you know, rural type people who are just doing their thing as normal. And, you know, in any small town, you know, they're not enforcing that stuff anywhere. I think most of rural America is like this. And in a lot of places, it's like there's nothing. There's no COVID cult in a lot of parts of the country. And there's not much of one here. So it feels very normal, and it feels very good, and everybody's armed, and everybody feels pretty self-sufficient, and it's going to have a hard time. The virus of the COVID cult is going to have a hard time, really, in America, in rural America.
Yeah. I just want to plug your sites real quick. Yeah. So o1experiment.com, is that correct?
o1experience.com. So it's
sorry about that.
Yep, 01experience.com. That band is kind of on the side right now. If you go to deprogrammatrix.com, one word, that takes you to a page where I'm going to start populating it. There's one like kind of a funny political anti-COVID video on there, and the music is kind of simplistic, but that was just like us just like testing the idea. and we're starting. The music for this band is going to be like progressive industrial metal, and it's going to have double bass and all that stuff. So that's going to be on that page, deprogrammatrix.com. And then there's vilemusic.com. Then there's the whole psychological, psychospiritual stuff that we talked about. That's shadowtechalchemy.com. And also my partner, Melissa, she's a fantastic singer, performance artist. And she's at Melissa Mari Music, Melissa, M-A-R-I, melissamarimusic.com. People might want to check her out. She also does studio, female vocals for people that need that. And and then my mastering website, imperialmastering.com. I master mainly metal bands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to mention that too.
Yeah, we didn't talk too much about that because there's just so much to talk about.
Oh, yeah. No, I think we covered a lot of ground with different things.
How long have we been talking for?
Maybe almost 3 hours.
No way. 4:42? 2 hours and 45 minutes. I know, well, I'm long-winded, and you asked me a question that has some, depth to it. I'm going to give you a very big answer. And so I know I do that all the time. So that can it's like a Joe Rogan podcast, right?
Yeah. Cool. So we got all the sites plugged in there. I also want to mention Vile is on Facebook. Vile Death Metal Music. Is that right? The Vile Death Metal.
Yeah, facebook.com/Vile Death Metal.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
I'm not really doing much with it, but it's there and there's material there. By the way, your audio sounds good. What kind of mic do you have there?
Oh, I just got a Samson Q2U.
Yeah, and you're practicing good mic technique, keeping it close to your mouth and stuff. I think that the audio sounds. The only Zoom, I guess Zoom kind of normalizes the audio, so you kind of get what you get unless you jack it up later in the editor. But yeah, it sounds very clear, and I hope my audio sounds clear enough.
Yeah, your camera is great too. Everything's luckily everyone's been pretty everyone on the podcast so far has had pretty consistent quality, but sometimes there's a weird like robot sound, like when the CPU is, and I don't know if that's on.
That's bandwidth.
Bandwidth, okay.
Yeah, that's your internet connection. That's somebody's internet connection is taking a dip in bandwidth for a moment. That's normal. That happens all the time with Skype or Zoom. Yeah.
Cool, Colin. I appreciate it, man.
My pleasure. It's great talking to you.
Anytime you want to do it again, man, I'm always down.
Just let me know if there's some other subjects you want to talk about, or if, and we'll do it. Absolutely.
Cool, man. Good to see you, man.
Yeah, you too, Luke. Yeah, and best of luck with the podcast. And I'll definitely be sharing your material. I'm not on Facebook too much, but I'll share your material, and I want to see who else you got lined up.
For sure.
Yeah.
Cheers,
okay,
buddy.
Man. Okay, cheers to you, Luke. Talk to you later.